This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were a shade higher today. MSCI's emerging market index ticked up slightly after steep losses in the prior session. South Africa's JSE climbed 0.5% as large cap stock Richmond rose as much as 2.6%, its biggest jump since October 5th. And that was after its competitor LVMH's third quarter sales far exceeded expectations, reviving some hope of a rebound in the luxury sector. Diversified miners Anglo American and BHP Group also helped lift the mining index today, which climbed 0.6%. In Nigeria, the oil share picked up slightly after a pretty flat week. The hashtag #EndSARS protests have weighed on activity. Also, of course, inflation surged to 13.71% in September, weakening buying pressure, especially in financially based stocks. Now, also coming up on today's show. As we mark World Food Day, we take a look at how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted food production in Africa. And British Airways is fined nearly $26 million for a data breach that affected more than 400,000 of its customers. And if you're in South Africa, you might want to take a bite of one of the best croissants in the world. Now, as we celebrate World Food Day on Friday, concerns over rising food prices and, of course, job losses triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic are intensifying those fears that food insecurity and malnutrition in lower income communities across Africa are on the rise. A recent survey by the International Committee of the Red Cross, involving about 2,400 people in 10 African nations, found that since the start of the pandemic, 94% of respondents had seen prices of food and other essentials in their local markets increase. 82% said they had lost income or revenue, and only 7% said they had enough savings to cope with a prolonged crisis. Well, our correspondent Adel El Marhoui tells us how equipping farmers with adequate skills has contributed to an increase in food production, export revenues, and achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, is massively developing Egyptian farmers' skills by providing modern irrigation and greenhouse techniques. The rural in Egypt is called Fallahin, Arabic for farmers. The term comes from the predominant craft that is agriculture. With its project, FAO is enhancing cultivation capabilities to farmers on the micro level.
Cultivating lands has been our profession for generations. My husband works in the field. The kids and I work with him to help.
Life forced me to learn agriculture. When it became hard for me after my husband's sickness, then death, anyone in my position will be forced to learn a craft to survive. I started planting vegetables and trees.
55-year-old widow Sayyida Ahmed is a mother of 5. She and her neighbor Hayam Hefnawi are implementing new cultivation techniques for greenhouse planting, which they recently learned. They are participants of the FAO's Good Agricultural Practices program. It's designed to enhance farmers' methods and increase their revenues.
The greenhouse activities are showing great results. We are consuming only 10% of water used in open fields. In greenhouses, the plantation happens vertically. It has increased the productivity threefold. It has great impact on small farmers because the family's income is tripled.
FAO Egypt programs serve farmers who own less than 3 acres of land. From cultivating vegetables, fruits, palm trees to irrigation techniques, fisheries, and animal breeding, it teaches Egyptians everything related to food production.
there is a need to improve post-harvest practices. And here, in particular, practices that keep quality and reduce losses, because we know one of the key problems facing countries in general, and to some extent Egypt, is post-harvest losses. You produce 100 units, by the time they reach consumer, they become 60.
In the food business cycle, this group of women farmers are at the bottom of the value chain. They earn the least. But thanks to FAO, Egyptian farmers are now getting trained to become more business-oriented. They also learn how to brand, clean and package vegetables and sell them at an added value.
Our ways of agriculture have greatly improved. In the past, cucumbers were planted in the land. The sun could burn the crop. Now we've learned modern cultivation. We use layers of pots. We used to depend on drip irrigation. Now we use pipes which drip water. And we're expanding in the medicinal herbs like artemisia.
Have you seen our eggplants? They are wonderful. We're now doing additional work to harvest and clean it, then pack it and sell it. We also market it across the village. We talk to people about quality, and some women would buy and even pre-order sometimes.
Programs like these are helping small farmers to support their surrounding communities and create job opportunities, no matter how small it is. Poor farmers like these women are becoming great contributors in bridging Egypt's food security. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Al Fayoum, Egypt.
And heading to Ethiopia now, the country is largely known as the birthplace of coffee Arabica. It is one of the world's biggest producers and exporters as well. Now, Ethiopia coffee exporters seem to have little to no complaints about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on its booming industry. Here's CGTN's Gerum Chala with more.
Almost everywhere in the world, and for most people in different countries, the morning coffee is an important day starter. Well, I think I'm one of those people. And in here, what I have is one of the world's finest Arabica coffee. Strong, aromatic, and exciting. Ethiopia's coffee is famous worldwide, and export destinations include Middle East, China, Japan, most of Europe, and the United States. And thanks to the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, coffee trading has become up-to-date, transparent, and quick. It's also helping small-scale coffee growers benefit more.
We are not only exporters of coffee, we are farmers too. Our company alone has from 300 to 400 outgrowers. Besides that, we buy quality coffee with fair price from the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange. Specialty, organic and certified coffee is available for export for the world market. The ECX platform benefits both the coffee growers and exporters equally.
In 2018-2019, Ethiopian exports are believed to have reached 3.98 million bags of coffee. That is 238.8 metric tons, making it the most important African coffee exporter and the 10th largest exporter in the world. And so the government has given due attention for its development. Experts say the all-rounded work from coffee bush to market has paid off.
We used to stop work during the rainy season, but this year we have even strengthened our export capacity. The coordinated work has even made the coffee export remain the leading commodity to still deliver higher results.
Ethiopia's coffee exports are highly supported by Ethiopian Airlines. Africa's largest and most profitable airline has made logistics services easier for coffee producers. And that has helped Ethiopia beat even Brazilian counterparts during these corona pandemic times.
Generally, when coffee exporting countries like Brazil are highly affected by the coronavirus, we have used the market advantage pretty well. The product movement has been assured by our very own airliner too. Therefore, global customers have increased their ties with us for their coffee demands to be met.
According to available data, Ethiopia's coffee domestic demand in Africa's top coffee consumer is expected to remain robust. Ethiopian coffee consumption expected to rise by 2.4% in 2019-2020. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And on that note, let's delve further into the topic of food security on the continent. We're joined by spokesperson from the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, Mr. John Macharia. Great to have you on the show with us today, Mr. Macharia. Now, undoubtedly, COVID-19 has intensified those warnings about Africa's broken food system. The UN is actually predicting that there'll be dire food outcomes going forward. And that's even despite the fact that most African nations have relatively effectively mitigated the spread of COVID-19. Give us a sense of how bad the situation is today compared to last year.
Thank you very much, and happy World Food Day. I think I would want to start by saying that though the situation does look dire, I think African nations did rally themselves and actually come to the table to actually mitigate not only the COVID pandemic, but also to forestall a food security crisis. And in this regard, I think a lot of the investment in the short run was really to take care of the COVID pandemic, but in the mid to long run, we are seeing governments refocusing efforts to continue to tackle the systemic issues that affect food security in different countries. And we are happy, for example, in Kenya, the government has made a commitment to double down on climate investments and to ensure that they're actually included in the budget so that you can begin to buttress and to build resilience, not only of household resilience, but also food systems resilience much broadly. In Kenya, for example, again, we saw the government actually set together a food security war room that was a multi-stakeholder platform that brought private sector to the table, that also brought an interministerial platform that allowed for the food security in the country to be mitigated. There was constant monitoring of prices, constant monitoring of the food that is available, constant monitoring of water, and a lot of the things. So I would really want to emphasize and to congratulate the African governments that were able to step up to the plate with AGRA, with FAO support, and others.
Well, Mr. Macharia, COVID-19 did reveal some major vulnerabilities in Africa's food systems. Give us a sense of what some of those key vulnerabilities COVID-19 shone a light on.
So far, I think the biggest issue that we are seeing as an alliance is the need to have early warning systems. And what we mean is, Africa in general, East Africa to be particular, we've also had a locust invasion. We've also had a fall armyworm outbreak. We've had MNLD, maize-lethal necrosis diseases, and quite a number of other issues. And this really brings to the front the need to have digital solutions that are able to warn us about pandemics, warn us about crisis, and things like this. And I'm happy to say that, for example, in Kenya, they actually used the opportunity to launch their digital agricultural strategy that actually speaks to the IT infrastructure that needs to be put in place to actually allow the government to have early warning systems. And beyond this, as an alliance, we're also working with the governments in Africa to actually develop digital food balance sheets so that no matter the crisis, we are actually every government is able to assure its citizens that about the amount of food that is available, or whether there's a need for import or a need for export of any extra surplus that the country might have. For example, in a country like Tanzania that has continuously had a food surplus in the last couple of years.
Now, of course, AGRA has been at the forefront of the continent's green revolution. So what can be done differently to address the resilience of food systems to future shocks going forward?
So there are two things to think about. The last decade was really about food production and the need to increase yields. This decade, really the hallmark and the theme really has been around climate change. But for Africa, we've not been able to completely deal with our food security issue. So those two things still continue to be pressing in the country, in the continent, and particularly for climate change. We still need to see an uptake of better technologies that are able to be drought resistant, that are early maturing. We would like to see smallholder farmers access conservation agriculture technologies, integrated soil fertility practices, and regenerative agricultural practices in this regard. And more critically, to be able to deliver this particular set of technologies, we also need to see an effective extension system. And as AGRA, we're actually helping African governments to actually revamp their extension system through an interesting private sector model called the village-based advisor model that is really helping smallholder farmers at the very local level access the right seeds, access the right fertilizer, access the right good agronomic practices.
Now, like you just mentioned, a number of people are pointing to technology as one of the key ways Africa can solve its food security issues. How important is technology, and what progress have we made so far in this area?
So technology is vitally important because it's a driver of efficiency, it's a driver of productivity. I would like to say this, as quite a number of our countries, the seed varieties that are available are about 40 years old. The best they can do is probably provide 4 or 5 metric tons. But we actually have new seed varieties that are able to provide up to 10 to 11 metric tons. And for Africa to be competitive and for Africa to feed itself and to feed the world, then adoption of technology therefore becomes an imperative. But more critically, we also need to think about our soils. For the longest time, Africa has been using macronutrients that are basically, the NPKs, and we have not, for the longest time, replenished the soils with nutrients like boron, like iron, like zinc, that are also not only important for the soil, but also important for people, depending on the diets that you're taking. So we think that it is also important for smallholder farmers to access crop and agroecology specific fertilizers, but more critically also to access smallholder irrigation, and we will be able to buttress the shocks that come with climate change.
Well, many thanks for your insights, Mr. Macharia. Of course, that's John Macharia. He is a spokesperson from the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Let's now turn our attention to some corporate headlines. Stripe Incorporated is acquiring Nigerian startup Paystack to jumpstart its expansion in Africa. That makes this the biggest startup acquisition to date to come out of Nigeria, as well as Stripe's biggest acquisition to date anywhere else in the world. Now, like Stripe, the Nigerian startup provides a quick way to integrate payment services into an online or offline transaction by way of an application programming interface. The deal is pending regulatory approval. The Sudanese government has signed a memorandum of understanding with General Electric to increase power generation by up to 470 megawatts. Now, GE says it plans to deliver electricity to about 600,000 households through mobile turbines that can be installed within months. It will also rehabilitate 3 existing power plants. And the EU Aviation Safety Agency says it is satisfied that changes to the Boeing 737 MAX have made the planes safe enough to return to the region's skies before 2020 is over. The announcement comes even though Boeing is yet to implement a software upgrade that the agency demanded, which could be 2 years before it is ready. The 737 MAX has been grounded since the second of 2 crashes that killed 346 people, which brought about the biggest crisis in Boeing's history. And finally, the owner of Louis Vuitton enjoyed an unexpected rebound in consumer appetite for dresses and bags. Organic revenue at its fashion and leather goods unit jumped 12% in the third quarter. LVMH's performance shows how its leading brands are helping to weather the pandemic's destructive economic consequences. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's take a short break now, still to come. Rising concerns that Ghana may be unable to pay its growing debt, currently at 68% of GDP. And South African dealers are worried about a revised scrap metal pricing system.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, according to the World Bank, the risk that Ghana may be unable to pay its debt is growing. The country's debt hit $45.4 billion. That's about 68% of its GDP in July. Now, economists say the coronavirus pandemic has partly contributed to the increase in debt, as the country borrowed more this year to reduce the impact of the pandemic. While CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Ghana's tax revenues took a nosedive when it went into lockdown in March due to the coronavirus pandemic, falling by 26% in the first half of the year. The shortfall meant the government had to borrow more to fund unplanned spending, especially within the health sector.
Expenditure on infrastructure has been going down in the country. It means the amounts of money the country has been borrowing is not being spent on infrastructure, which will expand the productive base of the country. But they are going into social intervention programs, things that may be of benefit to the poor in the short term, but it is not reflecting in the growth potential of the country. And for that matter, repaying these amounts of monies you have borrowed is becoming very difficult.
Ghana's debt jumped to $45.4 billion in July from $37.6 billion last year. The government says the increase is mainly due to the borrowing of $3 billion from the international market, coupled with the effect of COVID-19 and the weakening cedi against the US dollar. Ghana has lifted lockdown restrictions and the economy has begun to bounce back. The IMF says the economy will grow by 0.9% by the end of this year. But economists want the government to do more in raising internal revenue, especially from the country's natural resources like oil, so it can reduce its borrowing.
The country is just not generating enough. And I keep on saying, you cannot tax poor people and be able to raise so much revenue to develop your country. You need to be able to generate so much from your natural resource endowment. And the country is not doing well in that regards. The government of this country, the people of this country have to sit down and look at what is going wrong over there in the extractive sector.
While the country struggles to pay its debt, economists want the government to seek debt relief from their creditors. That is already being considered. Ghana's finance minister has called on private sector creditors to also join an extended G20 debt service suspension initiative that allows participating nations to delay payments. The initiative has since April deferred at least $5 billion of debt for more than 40 developing countries. For now, it's uncertain if Ghana will get some debt relief from its creditors, but the World Bank has urged African countries, including Ghana, to rein in spending and increase tax revenues to avoid defaulting on their debt. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Meanwhile, the IMF is predicting a better outlook for Nigeria's economy compared to its estimate in June. The revised forecast comes at a time when Nigeria's government says it is not considering the relief package offered by the World Bank for low-income nations. And that's following the COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondent, Phili Haza, with more.
The IMF says Nigeria's economy will do better next year. In June, the global body said Africa's largest economy would shrink by 5.4%, but now predicts a contraction of 4.3%.
From all indications, the economy is being opened gradually. So by December this year, Nigeria may likely open the entire economy. Every sector of the economy will be back again, and this will affect the GDP in a very positive way. Secondly, the oil price in the market is improving. And it's now on the average of $40 per barrel. By December or by first quarter of next year, it may improve to about 50 or so, because more economy in the world will improve.
And as Nigeria's economy improves, the government has turned down a debt relief plan from the World Bank. According to the government, keeping its reputation with its creditors is important. It also insists the country can afford to service its debt without World Bank support. However, Nigeria's debt is at a record level of $82 billion, so it's expected to have to reduce spending in some areas to bring borrowing under control.
Government can also reduce their own recurrent expenditure. Inasmuch that it's not advisable to reduce the number of government employees, because they will likely lead towards social unrest. But government can create more system to manage their recurrent expenditure, because as it's now, there are many ghost workers in the payroll of the government.
President Muhammadu Buhari has intensified efforts to ensure new salary platforms are put in place to combat fraud in the civil service.
The World Bank warns that despite African countries like Nigeria recording lower cases of coronavirus compared to other regions of the world, more vigilance is needed to avoid further outbreak of the COVID-19 disease. This, it says, will prevent another phase of lockdown which may cripple the economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And on to South Africa now. Concerns continue to rise in the metal recycling industry. That's after authorities amended the pricing system of scrap metal. Now, this move follows complaints by metal producing sectors who felt the pricing was delaying their recovery from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The new changes have, however, drawn serious criticism from some scrap metal dealers. And CGTN's Travis Andrews has more on that report.
It's been a challenging few months for South Africa's scrap metal industry. Not only has COVID-19 dealt a significant blow to their bottom line, but an amended pricing system has left many even further out of pocket. The key changes to the price preference system allows for a further discounted price for domestic buyers purchasing scrap metal, as well as a proposed export levy. The changes were made by the International Trade Administration Commission of South Africa and took effect at the beginning of October. For some scrap metal dealers, though, the move is negatively affecting their industry.
So this is nothing new. All right, all they've done is basically increase the cost from the coast. So there's a 30% discount to the international price, and from coastal areas they've taken off another 10%. And there's talk about an export tax. So it's nothing new. What was new was we had a 4-month absolute ban on any exports, which is why you see such a huge amount of stock built up here and presumably right around the country.
The pricing system was introduced in 2013 to promote the affordable supply of scrap metal to the local market, which contributes over $900 million to South Africa's GDP and employs over 350,000 people. With scrap metal continuing to pile up by the tons, Fine Trading Scrap Metal Solutions is facing significant challenges, including accessing its export market.
We have, for example, essential services industries like the food can manufacturers. So they were producing the whole way through COVID, and we obviously have to service them. So that material has been coming in here and just going into store, into warehouses. Just, as you can see all around, it's just piling up everywhere. So that's been a huge problem because for 4 months they simply stopped all exports. During COVID was one thing, but subsequent to that, for the last 4 months, they said they're doing an investigation, and during that investigative period, that they just absolutely banned any exports.
And with COVID-19 already placing significant pressure on many scrap dealers, the pricing issue is compounding what is already a sustainability issue facing the industry, not to mention avoiding job losses. The price amendment is not only affecting scrap metal traders, but also more than 200,000 scrap metal collectors who are now finding themselves in a far more financially constrained situation.
There's a little army of at least 200,000 unemployed people in the country that collect scrap. And when the prices drop, obviously, if they were getting 300 Rand a day for their scrap, now they're getting 200 Rand a day. That's a huge impact.
For now, the introduction of an export tax remains a long-term policy measure that is still under consideration and part of a broader master plan by the government to ramp up assistance to the steel and metals industry in the country. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
You are watching Global Business Africa. We are taking a short break now, but still coming up on the show. British Airways is fined nearly $26 million for a data breach. And Hong Kong considers creating a travel bubble with Singapore.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
No one again, he can holding guns.
Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Just about 1:30, let's recap today's top headlines. South Africa is no longer among the top 10 countries worst affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The infection rate has dropped and health facilities are reporting they have enough capacity to handle those who are seriously ill. In the Western Cape, most temporary hospitals have closed, but authorities there are keen not to let their guard down. And in Europe, many of the major capitals are reimposing various restrictions on people's movements as the continent struggles to deal with the second wave of the pandemic. In France, Paris is now under a nighttime curfew after the country saw record rises in new daily infections. But in Spain, hospitality workers in Barcelona have clashed with police after bars and restaurants were ordered closed in an effort to curb the spread of the virus. And schools across Uganda are welcoming back students for the first time since March. The government's decision comes as the country continues work to contain the coronavirus outbreak. The school reopening also comes with stringent measures to contain further spread of the virus. And that's a recap of today's headlines. Now, on the international front, the Information Commissioner's Office has fined British Airways nearly $26 million for a data breach that affected more than 400,000 customers in 2018. Now, the incident took place when the airline's systems were compromised by attackers. The data stolen included login, payment cards, and travel booking details, as well as name and address information. The Information Commissioner's Office says the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on global travel had been taken into account before the decision was reached, but it is still the largest penalty issued by the ICO to date. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region is considering launching a travel bubble with Singapore, allowing people to travel between the two cities without the need to quarantine. CGTN's Annie Chang reports.
Months after border closures because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Hong Kong region and Singapore have agreed in principle to set up a travel bubble. This means that residents can fly between both places without requiring quarantine. Announced on Thursday by Hong Kong's Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, Edward Yao called it a milestone in their efforts to resume normalcy while fighting against the long-drawn pandemic battle. Travelers still have to take COVID-19 tests, mutually recognized by both countries, but there won't be restrictions for travel purposes. Transit passengers are also not allowed on these flights, and this bilateral agreement can be modified to allow more or fewer flights depending on how the pandemic pans out in both cities.
I think reopening is a good thing. At least this allows tourists to travel again. The risk is always there, even if you step out of your home.
At this moment, I still won't be traveling because tests will still have the possibility of false negative.
We'll have to see how the pandemic situation is over there. But if it's okay, I'd still travel.
Singapore's Minister for Transport, Ong Ye Kung, says the confidence to open up borders with each other is due to low numbers of COVID-19 cases and good management in controlling the virus. Many in the industry have welcomed this announcement, including Hong Kong's flagship carrier Cathay Pacific. The International Air Transport Association said the reopening of borders will restore connectivity that jobs and economic activities depend on. And a tourism expert predicts potential travelers will welcome this opportunity to travel because of pandemic fatigue. Meanwhile, an expert with the Hong Kong Medical Association says this travel bubble won't pose excessive risks because of similar pandemic situations and measures in both cities. But he urged precaution against visitors getting infected by other travelers under quarantine at hotels. Details of this agreement have yet to be ironed out, but both governments are hoping to launch it within weeks. Anne Chang, CGTN, Hong Kong.
In the meantime, people from New Zealand are allowed to travel to Australia once again without needing to quarantine. It is part of a new trans-Tasman travel bubble created between the two nations. Greg Navarro has more from Sydney.
Sydney's airport here has remained largely empty during this pandemic, as most airports around the world have, the result of Australia closing off its borders. However, on this day, something we haven't seen here for quite some time. 3 flights arriving from New Zealand carrying several hundred people, those people not needing to spend any time in quarantine. It's part of a new trans-Tasman travel bubble, the agreement reached between the Prime Ministers of Australia and New Zealand, based largely on the performances of both countries in slowing the spread of the virus. Now, at the moment, it only applies to here in New South Wales as well as the Northern Territory, and it comes as community transmission cases here in New South Wales are up slightly, but nowhere near the levels that other countries are experiencing at the moment. There is an economic angle to all of this. Both prime ministers hoping to receive a little bit of a boost in tourism as a result of this arrangement. That arrangement at the moment remaining largely one-sided, meaning people from Australia can travel to New Zealand. If they do, though, they still need to spend 14 days in quarantine. There is no word yet on when that might change. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Now, of course, major cities in the UK are facing stricter lockdowns to control a spike in new coronavirus infections. The country already has one of Europe's deadliest outbreaks, with more than 43,000 confirmed deaths. CGTN's Naweed Jabrakil reports from London.
The UK's capital and one of the world's leading cities is going back into tighter lockdown. From midnight on Friday, people in Europe's richest city will not be allowed to mix with other households indoors. Mayor Sadiq Khan warned Londoners that they've got a difficult winter ahead.
The virus is spreading rapidly in every corner of our city. We'll soon reach an average of 100 cases per 100,000 people, with a significant number of boroughs already over that threshold.
It's not just London. The city of Manchester in northern England will see even tougher measures imposed. The UK's Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the measures were necessary to get the virus under control.
And we must act now. Delayed action means more deaths from COVID, it means more non-COVID deaths, and it means more economic pain later.
These are tough decisions for the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who's conscious of the economic damage that these lockdowns, or even tougher steps being considered, could have. The NIESR think tank predicts a 2-week shutdown of the economy could cost more than $26 billion. London's role as a global financial capital will also have weighed on policymakers ahead of these latest measures. The government insists they are needed, but millions of people in some of Britain's biggest cities will see life curtailed once again. Naweed Jabrakil, CGTN, London.
Now, Asia's pod hotels have arrived in Colombia. The concept was brought to the country by a group of college students, and they're now planning their 4th capsule hotel. Michelle Baker reports on what's hot tonight.
Colombian college student Alvaro Ovalle got the idea for his business during a trip to Europe with friends.
We saw that in most places hostels were full, and it was that uncomfortable situation where you wanted to leave early so as not to see your neighbour. Then there was the second option of staying at a hotel that cost €200 a night. So there was nothing in between the two options that would be nice, homey and cheap.
The solution, a pod hotel where travelers sleep in a personal space just large enough to fit a single bed. Bathrooms are communal, but separate for men and women. The concept began around 40 years ago in Japan and expanded to cities across Asia. One research report forecasts the capsule hotel market could reach 226 million by the end of 2022. Alvaro Ovalle and his college friends launched their own capsule hotel in Colombia 3 years ago and have quickly expanded. They are about to open a third hotel in Bogotá and have opened their first in Medellín.
People are finally understanding that there is no need to stay in a huge room when, in the end, all you will do there is sleep or maybe just watch television. In a pod, you have your tablet and you will be paying 50 or 60% less than what you pay in a conventional hotel.
In Colombia, a pod costs around $8 a night. During the pandemic, the hotel owners say they abide by all the public health measures mandated by the government.
If you stay at a hostel, if you cough, you sprayed the air where others are sleeping in bunk beds near you. Here you are in your module that has you isolated, which minimizes your contact with others.
Colombia resumed international flights in September, which could be an opportunity for this new capsule hotel chain. For travelers on a budget, the owners say their enclosed pods offer what may be the safest hotel accommodation during the pandemic. Michelle Vega, CGTN, Bogotá, Colombia.
Well, let's shift focus now and take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices continue to fall on those concerns that a spike in COVID-19 cases in Europe and the US continue to hurt demand in two of the world's biggest fuel-consuming regions. Now, a technical committee of OPEC Plus ended their meeting on Thursday, and they expressed some concern about a weak demand outlook. Meanwhile, a stronger dollar also continues to put some pressure on oil prices. Gold prices slipping on Friday and looking set to post their first weekly drop in 3 weeks. They were also pressured by a stronger dollar. We saw spot gold falling 0.1% as coronavirus cases surge and progress towards U.S. stimulus talks stall. Well, let's take a short break now. Still coming up on the show. A South African bakery is named as one of the best in the world to produce the perfect croissant. And we take you for a spin with a female delivery driver making her mark in a male-dominated industry.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, South Africans no longer have to fly to France for the best croissant because a Cape Town patisserie has been named as one of 4 in the world to produce the perfect croissant. The other top rankings can be found in Paris, Tokyo and Melbourne. Take a look.
Who would have thought that one of the best croissants in the world would be found right here in Africa? Cape Town, to be specific. Known for fine dining, Coco Safa Cafe has been recognized by Food and Wine USA, exceeding expectations of many, including its owner, Wilhelm Liebenberg.
At the tip of Africa, where it was unthinkable to deliver products that's at the level of Paris and Tokyo and New York, we're now in a position where we're actually delivering that, training local people at levels that you expect in Paris. And a couple of weeks ago, we were recognized as one of the 4 best croissant producers in the world, and by default bakery.
The acknowledgement places the cafe right amongst the best in the world. That includes the award-winning Parisian cafe Dupont et Degide.
We're competing on a global scale now, and for us as local pastry or as a local bakery, it's quite an achievement.
For the last 5 years since it opened its doors, it has attracted both locals and tourists, all keen on sampling the pastry that is originally from France.
The best and the croissant in the world.
I had a lot of croissants in different places. I must say this croissant is like the perfect butter croissant because it is quite important. Like if you bite into the croissant, it needs to make like the sound, and it needs to have like this buttery and yeah, obviously Paris kind of style flavor. I cannot even explain it, but it is like the croissant you would expect in Paris.
Coco Safa will be rolling out in selective major capitals including New York, Paris, London and Tokyo, just to name a few. Liebenberg is currently in talks with major international luxury groups to go global in 2021. Hlonela Lupuwana, CGTN.
Now, gender stereotypes, especially in the workplace, is a major problem in most African societies. But one female delivery driver in the Nigerian commercial city of Lagos is now challenging that stereotype by taking up a role in what is considered a male-dominated profession. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with her story.
Loading their buses for the day's delivery. In Nigeria, the job of a delivery driver is considered a man's world. So it's not a coincidence that all the delivery drivers here are men. But there's one exception. Meet Joy Sampson, the young woman challenging a deeply entrenched societal stereotype and proving that gender should be no barrier to whatever an individual chooses to do. She's one of 2 female delivery drivers working for B2B distribution startup Trade Depot in the city of Lagos. Her job routine requires that she comes to the warehouse here as early as 7 a.m. each day to pick up items and deliver to retailers across the city.
Well, I've been coping fine, though it's kind of hard on me as a woman. But at the same time, I'm coping because, men appreciate me more when they see me, even my colleagues, the way they talk to me, my bosses, the way they talk to me gives me that courage to feel like I can do more than this. This is just like a challenge that women can do more than sitting in the office.
It's difficult to imagine that Joy left a career in IT as a data collection operator to take up this job. But that's exactly what she did. And she says it was just the right decision for her.
Actually, it wasn't giving me enough time. I go work very early, close late and all that. So it was not really giving me what I wanted as a woman. So I started to join Shop Top Up because I have a lot of time after work. I close on time. So with that, I have time to do my own personal business. I'm into hairdressing, so I have time to do other things like my hairdressing work.
Navigating through the daily traffic jam in the city is one of her biggest challenges. And as for stereotypes, she says she doesn't even think about it, with her ultimate goal, her main focus.
This job is kind of hard for a woman, let me just put it like that. When you can't be doing it consistently, you have to put a stop to it at some point. So when I put a stop, I like to put myself into a business, provision business, something similar to what I'm doing, to encourage others. With that, I can employ people too. Maybe I can even start my own Shop Top Up very soon.
Joy was our first female delivery agent. She's, should I say, one of our most reliable agents, really. She's always on time. She does not miss work. She's always there. Sometimes when we have like a lot of orders and a lot of volume, you're thinking, oh, you might need to overstretch some people and, let them go further and, deliver to a lot of customers for the day. Joy does not complain. She will always get the job done.
For now, Joy says she enjoys her job and hopes other women can draw inspiration from her by choosing not to be limited by societal stereotypes. Dejibadmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, before we leave you, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand rising about 0.4%, and that's after President Ramaphosa on Thursday outlined a public works and jobs creation drive to help pull its economy out of the gutter. This is its first day of gains in 3 as the global focus remains on U.S. stimulus and the rising number of COVID-19 cases. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.